Discipline is not restriction. It is strength. It is the ability to act when you do not feel like it. To pause when emotion demands movement. To stay when distraction invites escape. Most people chase motivation. Motivation fades. Discipline remains. Strength is not loud. It is controlled. This audiobook is about building that control. Not through intensity. Through standards. Discipline is strength. And strength is built daily. Motivation is unstable. It rises quickly. It fades just as fast. Most people build their lives around it. They wait to feel ready. They wait to feel inspired. They wait to feel certain. While they wait, nothing changes. That's the key. Waiting is the habit that weakens discipline. You have a choice. You can keep waiting for the right mood. Or you can act regardless of it. Action must not depend on emotion. Emotion fluctuates. Standards do not. Most people misunderstand motivation. They believe it creates action. It does not. Action creates motivation. But they reverse the order. They tell themselves they will start when they feel like it. That feeling rarely arrives on time. When it does arrive, it is temporary. You build nothing stable on something temporary. Discipline begins when waiting stops. This is the shift. You stop asking, "Do I feel like it?" You start asking, "Is this required?" If it is required, you act. No debate. Most hesitation is emotional. The task feels uncomfortable. The effort feels heavy. The outcome feels uncertain. Emotion says wait. Discipline says move. It's not about mood. It's about discipline. Mood is a suggestion. Discipline is a decision. You do not negotiate with suggestions. You execute decisions. Most people wait because they fear discomfort. They want energy before they start. They want clarity before they move. They want confidence before they try. Confidence comes after action. Clarity improves through engagement. Energy increases with movement. Waiting delays all of it. That's the key. Action creates the conditions people wait for. You don't need their permission to begin imperfectly. You do not need approval to act without enthusiasm. You are allowed to move forward without feeling ready. Most tasks do not require intensity. They require consistency. Consistency builds strength. Strength builds identity. Identity stabilizes behavior. Behavior repeated becomes automatic. Waiting interrupts that process. Every time you delay action for mood, you reinforce weakness. You teach yourself that feeling determines behavior. This is dangerous. Because feeling is unpredictable. You have a choice. You can allow emotion to set your pace. Or you can set the pace yourself. Setting the pace is strength. Strength is quiet. It does not need excitement. It needs repetition. Repetition builds discipline. Discipline reduces reliance on emotion. This is practical. You wake up. You act. Not because you feel inspired. Because you decided yesterday. Pre-decided action removes hesitation. Hesitation drains energy. Energy lost to hesitation reduces performance. Most people are tired from indecision. Not from work. They argue with themselves. Should I start now? Should I wait? Should I delay? This internal debate weakens focus. Discipline removes debate. You decide once. Then you execute. That's the key. Fewer decisions create more strength. Waiting for motivation is also a form of avoidance. It disguises fear. Fear of failure. Fear of discomfort. Fear of imperfection. Instead of naming fear, People call it lack of motivation. This keeps them comfortable. Comfort maintains stagnation. You stop doing this. You identify the task. You act despite discomfort. Not aggressively. Calmly. Stillness before action helps. You pause. You regulate your breath. You settle your body. Then you move. This sequence matters. Regulate. Then act. Acting while emotionally charged creates resistance. Acting while regulated creates momentum. Momentum builds confidence. Confidence reduces hesitation next time. This is how discipline grows. It is trained, not wished for. Most people think discipline is personality. It is practice. You practice acting without waiting. Daily. In small ways. You do not wait to feel like working. You begin. You do not wait to feel like exercising. You start. You do not wait to feel like improving. You take one step. Small action matters. Small action compounds. Compounding builds strength. That's the key. Discipline is built in ordinary moments. Not dramatic ones. You do not need large bursts of effort. You need steady execution. Steady execution creates reliability. Reliability builds trust. Trust in yourself is powerful. When you know you act regardless of mood, anxiety decreases. You stop worrying about whether you will follow through. You already know. This reduces internal noise. Reduced noise improves focus. Focus strengthens discipline. Everything connects. You have a choice. You can remain dependent on feeling. Or you can become dependent on standards. Standards create predictability. Predictability creates control. Control builds strength. Strength reduces emotional volatility. Most people chase motivation because it feels powerful. It is not. It is temporary stimulation. Discipline is quieter. But it lasts. It's not about excitement. It's about discipline. Excitement fades. Discipline remains. When you stop waiting, something changes. You feel resistance less intensely. Because you stop analyzing it. Analysis amplifies resistance. Execution weakens it. You act before resistance grows. This is strategic. Delay increases difficulty. Immediate, calm action reduces it. You do not rush. You move deliberately. Deliberate movement builds stability. Stability reinforces identity. Identity shifts from I try to I execute. Execution is strength. Waiting is weakness disguised as patience. You stop disguising it. You call it what it is. Delay. And you remove it. No drama. No self-criticism. Just action. You pause briefly to regulate. Then you begin. That is discipline. That is strength. Discipline begins when waiting stops. This is the foundation. Without it, nothing else holds. If you depend on motivation, every chapter that follows collapses. Control cannot exist if mood leads. You learn that motivation is unstable. You learn that action must not depend on mood. Now you must strengthen reaction control. Because even if you act without waiting, reaction can still disrupt you. Next, you will learn how to stop emotional reaction from stealing strength. Reaction is where strength collapses. You can act without motivation. You can start without feeling ready. But if you react impulsively, discipline breaks. That's the key. Uncontrolled reaction destroys controlled effort. Most people believe reaction is natural. They justify it. I was angry. I was stressed. I was overwhelmed. These are explanations, not standards. Emotion explains behavior. It does not excuse it. You have a choice. You can let emotion decide your response. Or you can regulate before you move. Regulation is strength. Reaction is automatic. Regulation is trained. Most reactions happen in seconds. A comment triggers you. A delay frustrates you. A mistake irritates you. You respond immediately. That immediacy feels honest. It is not strength. It is exposure. Exposure gives away control. When you react without pause, you hand authority to circumstance. Circumstances change constantly. Strength cannot depend on them. Pause is the interruption. Not silence forever. Silence long enough. Long enough for the body to settle. Long enough for attention to gather. Long enough for you to choose. You do not need their permission to pause before responding. You do not owe anyone immediate emotion. You are allowed to regulate. Most people confuse speed with confidence. They believe quick responses show certainty. They often show instability. Stability is slower. Measured. Deliberate. That's the key. Strength is controlled timing. Reaction feels powerful in the moment. It gives relief. Relief is temporary. Consequences last. Words spoken too quickly. Decisions made under stress. Actions taken in frustration. All of them weaken trust. Trust once damaged takes effort to rebuild. Prevention is easier. Prevention requires pause. You have a choice. You can discharge emotion immediately. Or you can hold it long enough to think clearly. Holding is not suppression. It is observation. Observation creates distance. Distance reduces intensity. Reduced intensity restores judgment. Judgment protects strength. Most people act from their first thought. First thoughts are often emotional. They are shaped by habit, by insecurity, by impulse. Second thoughts are clearer. But second thoughts require time. If you never pause, you never reach them. That's the key. Clarity is delayed by seconds, not lost. You must allow those seconds. Stillness is not passive. It is strategic. In stillness, you regain command of sequence. Regulate. Observe. Decide. Act. Reaction reverses this. Act. Explain. Regret. You stop living in that sequence. Regulation begins physically. Slow your breathing. Lengthen the exhale. Relax your jaw. Lower your shoulders. These are not relaxation techniques. They are control mechanisms. Control begins in the body. When the body settles, the mind follows. When the mind settles, decisions improve. It's not about emotion. It's about discipline. Emotion will always appear. Discipline decides what happens next. Most people fear appearing weak if they pause. They rush to defend, to justify, to prove. Proving is insecurity. Strength does not rush. Strength selects timing. You don't need their permission to respond later. You do not need validation to stay calm. Silence is not weakness. It is leverage. Leverage increases influence. When you remain composed, others adjust. When you stay calm, pressure shifts. This is power without aggression. Reaction also disrupts internal stability. Not just external situations. A mistake happens. You react internally. Self-criticism escalates. Thoughts spiral. Focus collapses. You lose more time to reaction than to the mistake itself. This must stop. You feel the mistake. You pause. You correct calmly. Correction is efficient. Escalation is waste. That's the key. Reaction multiplies problems. Regulation contains them. You train this daily. In small moments first. Minor irritations. Small frustrations. Tiny delays. You practice not reacting instantly. You feel the urge. You hold. You breathe. You decide. Repetition builds automatic control. Over time, something changes. Emotion still appears. But it no longer commands behavior. It informs. Information is useful. Impulse is not. Most people believe they are strong because they express everything. Expression without control is exposure. Control without suppression is strength. You express when it is effective, not when it is emotional. That distinction defines discipline. You have a choice. You can remain reactive and unstable. Or you can become regulated and reliable. Reliability builds confidence. Confidence reduces fear. Fear often triggers reaction. When fear decreases, reaction decreases. Everything connects. Control your reactions and you protect your progress. Without reaction control, discipline leaks. With it, discipline stabilizes. This chapter is about authority. Authority over timing. Authority over response. Authority over sequence. When you control reaction, you control outcome. Not completely, but significantly. Strength grows when reaction shrinks. That is the standard. You learned how to stop waiting for motivation. Now you know that starting is not enough. You must also respond with control. Next, you will face something harder. Comfort. Because even regulated action can weaken if you constantly choose what is easy. Easy choices weaken discipline. They feel harmless. Small shortcuts. Small delays. Small compromises. Repeated daily. That's the key. Comfort compounds just like effort. Most people do not collapse from one bad decision. They erode from repeated easy ones. You have a choice. You can choose what feels good now. Or you can choose what strengthens you long term. Strength is built-in friction. Comfort removes friction. Without friction, nothing grows. Most avoidance hides behind logic. I'll do it later. It's not urgent. I deserve a break. Sometimes that is true. Often it is escape. Escape trains weakness. Weakness makes future effort heavier. Each time you avoid discomfort, you increase the cost of action next time. That is the hidden penalty. You don't need their permission to choose the harder path. You do not need validation to take the uncomfortable step. You are allowed to challenge yourself. Choosing hard does not mean extreme. It means deliberate. You select the action that builds capacity, not the one that preserves comfort. Capacity is what matters. Capacity determines how much pressure you can hold. Pressure is inevitable. If you only choose easy tasks, your tolerance stays low. Low tolerance produces stress. Stress produces reaction. Reaction weakens discipline. Everything connects. It's not about suffering. It's about discipline. Discipline chooses growth over relief. Relief is temporary. Growth is permanent. Most people wait until they feel strong to attempt difficult tasks. This is backward. Strength is built through difficulty. You build strength by choosing the harder option consistently. Small examples matter. Taking the walk when you feel lazy. Finishing the task when you want to stop. Saying no when approval tempts you. These are training moments. They look small. They shape identity. Identity forms from repeated behavior. If you repeatedly choose easy, you see yourself as someone who avoids. If you repeatedly choose hard, you see yourself as someone who endures. Endurance builds confidence. Confidence reduces hesitation. Hesitation drains energy. That's the key. Choosing hard reduces future resistance. Most people chase comfort because they fear discomfort. They treat discomfort as danger. It is not danger. It is stimulus. Stimulus strengthens when met calmly. If you react emotionally to discomfort, it grows. If you face it steadily, it shrinks. Stillness helps here. Before choosing, you pause. You regulate. You ask a simple question. Which option builds strength? Then you act. Not aggressively. Calmly. Calm action under discomfort builds resilience. Resilience is strategic. It protects you when conditions are unstable. You have a choice. You can train resilience daily. Or you can remain fragile under pressure. Fragility feels fine when life is easy. It collapses when life is not. Choosing hard also trains attention. Hard tasks require focus. Easy tasks encourage distraction. If you constantly choose easy work, your focus weakens. If you choose demanding work, focus strengthens. Demand builds capacity. Capacity supports discipline. Most people avoid hard tasks because they threaten ego. They fear looking incompetent. They fear struggling. Struggle is necessary. Struggle exposes weakness. Exposure allows correction. Correction builds strength. You do not need to protect your ego. You need to strengthen your discipline. Ego seeks comfort. Discipline seeks growth. That's the key. Growth requires friction. Friction is uncomfortable. Comfort eliminates friction. When friction disappears, progress stalls. Choosing hard also means delaying gratification. Immediate pleasure is easy. Delayed reward requires patience. Patience is a form of strength. When you can wait calmly, you control impulse. Impulse often leads to regret. Regret drains confidence. Confidence supports discipline. Everything connects. You don't need their permission to delay pleasure. You do not need approval to choose long-term over short-term. You are allowed to invest in your future self. Most people underestimate small comforts. Scrolling instead of thinking. Snacking instead of pausing. Avoiding instead of confronting. These are minor in isolation. In repetition, they define character. Character is built from daily decisions. Not dramatic moments. Daily repetition matters more than occasional intensity. That's the key. Strength grows in ordinary choices. You choose hard. In simple ways. Take the harder conversation. Hold the uncomfortable silence. Stay with the demanding task. You do not dramatize it. You execute. Over time, something shifts. Hard stops feeling extreme. It becomes normal. Your tolerance increases. Tasks that once felt heavy become manageable. This reduces stress. Reduced stress improves clarity. Clarity improves decision-making. Decision-making shapes outcomes. Choosing hard also builds internal respect. When you know you act in alignment with growth, trust increases. Self-trust reduces anxiety. Anxiety often comes from knowing you are avoiding something. When you confront consistently, anxiety decreases. You feel steadier. Not because life is easier. Because you are stronger. It's not about intensity. It's about discipline. Discipline selects growth repeatedly. Even when unnoticed. Even when inconvenient. This is quiet strength. Most people look for dramatic change. They ignore consistent discomfort. Consistent discomfort builds stability. Stability supports discipline. Discipline builds strength. Strength is what you are building. You have a choice. You can protect comfort. Or you can build capacity. One keeps you safe temporarily. The other prepares you permanently. Choosing hard is not punishment. It is preparation. Preparation reduces fear. Fear triggers reaction. Reaction weakens control. Prepared individuals remain steady. This steadiness is strength. You learned how to stop waiting for motivation. You learned how to control reaction. Now you understand that comfort erodes discipline. Next, you must strengthen something deeper. Your ability to remain composed without constant stimulation. Because even if you choose hard, your mind must be stable enough to hold it. Stillness is misunderstood. Most people associate it with inactivity, with passivity, with withdrawal. It is none of that. Stillness is control without movement. That's the key. Strength grows when you can remain steady without reacting. Most people are uncomfortable in silence. When noise fades, thoughts rise. When stimulation drops, restlessness appears. They interpret this as weakness. It is exposure. Exposure reveals how dependent they are on movement. Movement hides instability. Stillness reveals it. You have a choice. You can keep filling every gap with stimulation. Or you can train yourself to remain steady without it. Training begins in quiet. Not dramatic silence. Simple reduction. No background audio. No constant checking. No unnecessary input. You sit. You breathe. You observe. At first, the urge to move is strong. The mind looks for distraction. The body seeks activity. This is conditioning. You do not obey. You remain. Remaining builds tolerance. Tolerance builds strength. It's not about relaxation. It's about discipline. Stillness trains attention. When you sit without reacting, you see impulses clearly. The urge to check your phone. The urge to stand up. The urge to think about something else. Most people follow these impulses automatically. They mistake impulse for instruction. Impulse is only a signal. You decide what to do with it. That decision point is strength. You don't need their permission to be quiet. You do not need approval to disengage temporarily. Silence is not weakness. It is preparation. Preparation strengthens response. When you are still, you notice internal patterns. Anxiety. Impatience. Self-criticism. Without stillness, these patterns run unseen. Unseen patterns control behavior. Seen patterns can be managed. That's the key. Awareness through stillness restores authority. Most emotional reactions happen because people never slow down. They act from tension. Tension builds in the background. Stillness releases it before it explodes. Explosions damage relationships. Damage progress. Damage confidence. Calm endurance prevents explosion. You practice sitting without reacting. 5 minutes. 10 minutes. You do not seek peace. You seek stability. If discomfort arises, you observe it. You do not fix it. Observation reduces intensity. Reaction increases it. This is how emotional regulation strengthens. Stillness also improves decision-making. When you are used to silence, urgency loses influence. You do not feel pressured to respond instantly. You take a breath. You think clearly. Clarity produces accurate action. Accuracy reinforces confidence. Confidence reduces fear. Fear often drives impulsive behavior. Stillness interrupts that pattern. You have a choice. You can remain dependent on stimulation, or you can become steady without it. Dependency weakens discipline. Steadiness strengthens it. Most people fear boredom. They interpret it as emptiness. Boredom is transition. It appears when the mind is no longer constantly stimulated. If you stay through boredom, something shifts. Attention deepens. Thoughts slow. Perception sharpens. That's the key. Depth begins where stimulation ends. Without depth, focus is fragile. With depth, focus stabilizes. Stillness also builds patience. Patience is strength under time pressure. When you can wait calmly, you control pace. When you control pace, you control outcome. Rushing is usually fear disguised as urgency. Stillness exposes that fear. Exposure reduces its power. You do not need to eliminate fear. You need to remain steady while it exists. This is disciplined calm. Calm is not softness. Calm is controlled energy. Most people equate intensity with power. Intensity burns out. Calm sustains. Sustained behavior builds identity. Identity shapes future action automatically. When you identify as composed, your reactions change. When you identify as steady, pressure affects you less. Stillness is the training ground for that identity. You practice not moving when impulse demands it. You practice not speaking when emotion pushes. You practice not acting when urgency pressures. These are small acts. They compound. Compound discipline becomes strength. You have a choice. You can keep responding immediately to internal noise. Or you can let the noise pass without action. Noise fades when ignored. Reaction feeds it. Stillness starves it. That's the key. What you do not reinforce weakens. Strength and stillness also improves physical control. Breathing steadies. Posture stabilizes. Muscle tension decreases. Physical calm reinforces mental calm. The body and mind are not separate. Regulate one, and the other follows. This is strategic. You use stillness intentionally. Not to escape. To strengthen. You do not need long sessions. You need consistency. Daily practice. Short moments of deliberate quiet. No distraction. No multitasking. Just presence. Presence builds awareness. Awareness builds control. Control builds strength. Strength sustains discipline. Without stillness, discipline becomes rigid. Rigid discipline breaks under stress. Calm discipline adapts. Adaptation maintains control. This is why stillness matters. It prevents overreaction. It prevents emotional escalation. It prevents wasted energy. Most mistakes come from acting too fast. Stillness slows sequence. Slowed sequence improves precision. Precision reduces regret. Regret weakens confidence. Confidence supports discipline. Everything connects. You learned how to stop waiting for motivation. You learned how to control reactions. You learned how to choose hard over easy. Now you understand that without internal steadiness, discipline remains unstable. Stillness builds that steadiness. Next, you must strengthen reliability. Because strength is not just about starting. It is about finishing. Starting feels powerful. Finishing builds strength. Most people enjoy beginnings. New plans. New goals. New energy. Beginnings feel clean. But strength is measured at the end. That's the key. Completion defines discipline. Unfinished work weakens identity. You start a task. You stop halfway. You shift to something else. This becomes a pattern. The pattern becomes your standard. If your standard is partial effort, your confidence reflects it. You have a choice. You can keep chasing new beginnings. Or you can finish what you start. Finishing builds reliability. Reliability builds trust. Trust in yourself reduces hesitation. Most people quit when discomfort increases. The task becomes harder. The excitement fades. The resistance grows. They interpret resistance as a sign to stop. It is not. Resistance marks the middle. The middle is where discipline is tested. It's not about motivation. It's about discipline. Discipline continues when excitement fades. Excitement is emotional. Completion is structural. Unfinished tasks drain attention. Even when you are not actively working on them, they remain open. Open loops consume mental space. Mental space is limited. When space is cluttered, focus weakens. Weak focus increases distraction. Distraction delays progress. Delay increases stress. Stress feeds avoidance. This cycle must end. Finishing closes loops. Closed loops restore clarity. Clarity supports control. That's the key. Completion protects attention. Most people underestimate the cost of partial effort. They believe they can return later without impact. They cannot. Each restart requires energy. Energy spent restarting could have been spent progressing. Repeated restarts erode confidence. Confidence eroded leads to hesitation. Hesitation delays action. Delay weakens discipline. You stop this pattern. You commit to fewer things. You complete them. Not aggressively. Steadily. You do not need their permission to say no to new tasks. You do not need approval to protect your focus. You are allowed to prioritize completion. Prioritization is strength. Strength reduces chaos. Chaos fragments attention. Finishing also strengthens identity. When you consistently complete what you begin, you see yourself differently. Not as someone who tries. As someone who executes. Execution builds authority. Authority stabilizes behavior. Behavior repeated becomes automatic. Automatic completion reduces decision fatigue. Decision fatigue weakens discipline. You remove unnecessary decisions by finishing. You choose the harder path. Not because it is dramatic. Because it builds strength. The harder path is staying when you want to leave. The harder path is refining when you want to rush. The harder path is pushing through the middle. The middle is uncomfortable. Not exciting. Not new. Just effort. Most people abandon effort when novelty fades. You do not. You remain. Stillness helps here. When you feel the urge to quit, you pause. You regulate. You breathe. You observe the resistance. You do not act on it immediately. Resistance often peaks and falls. If you stay calm, it weakens. If you react, it strengthens. You have a choice. You can quit when resistance appears. Or you can stay long enough for it to pass. One trains weakness. The other trains endurance. Endurance is strength over time. Strength over time builds results. Results reinforce discipline. Finishing what you start also builds emotional control. You learn that discomfort is temporary. You learn that effort does not destroy you. You learn that completion feels different than starting. It feels solid. Grounded. Earned. This changes your relationship with work. Work stops being a burst of emotion. It becomes a steady process. Steady process builds calm. Calm reduces reactivity. Reduced reactivity protects discipline. Everything connects. You also learn to define finish clearly. Vague goals weaken completion. Clear endpoints strengthen it. You decide what done means before you begin. This prevents endless adjustment. Endless adjustment is avoidance in disguise. Clarity prevents drift. Drift wastes energy. Energy conserved supports focus. You do not rush to finish. You finish correctly. Rushing creates errors. Errors require correction. Correction consumes time. Precision saves time. Precision requires patience. Patience is strength. You don't need their permission to slow down enough to complete properly. You are allowed to prioritize quality over speed. Quality builds trust. Trust builds confidence. Confidence reduces fear. Fear often drives quitting. When fear weakens, completion strengthens. Finishing also teaches you to manage momentum. Momentum increases when tasks are completed. Completion creates psychological closure. Closure frees attention for the next task. Without closure, attention splits. Split attention weakens performance. Completion unifies attention. Unified attention produces depth. Depth produces excellence. Excellence builds pride. Pride rooted in discipline is stable. Not emotional pride. Quiet satisfaction. That's the key. Strength is built in follow-through, not in intention. Intentions are common. Follow-through is rare. You separate yourself by finishing. Even when it is boring. Even when it is inconvenient. Even when no one notices. Discipline does not depend on recognition. It depends on standards. Your standard becomes simple. If I start, I finish. If I commit, I complete. No emotional debate. No dramatic exit. Completion. You have a choice. You can continue living in partial effort. Or you can build a reputation with yourself. Reputation with yourself matters most. When you trust your follow-through, anxiety decreases. You stop doubting your future behavior. Doubt drains energy. Trust restores it. Restored energy fuels discipline. Discipline sustains strength. This chapter is about integrity. Integrity between intention and action. When intention and action align, strength increases. When they diverge, confidence erodes. You choose alignment. You finish. You complete. You close loops. This builds the backbone of discipline. Without it, nothing else holds. You learned how to build strength in stillness. Now you have learned how to convert that strength into completion. Next, you must protect the resource that makes all of this possible. Your attention. Attention is a resource. Limited. Valuable. Easily stolen. Most people spend it without awareness. They react to notifications. They scroll without purpose. They absorb opinions without filtering. Then they wonder why focus feels weak. That's the key. Where attention goes, strength follows. If attention is scattered, strength is diluted. You have a choice. You can let attention be pulled. Or you can decide where it lives. Decision is discipline. Discipline protects resources. Attention shapes behavior. What you repeatedly focus on trains your nervous system. If you focus on outrage, you become reactive. If you focus on distraction, you become scattered. If you focus on discipline, you become stable. Most people do not choose consciously. They allow whatever is loud to win. Loud is not important. Loud is just aggressive. You do not need their permission to ignore noise. You do not need approval to disengage from useless input. You are allowed to protect your mind. Guarding attention begins with refusal. Not everything deserves entry. Not every message requires response. Not every update requires awareness. Selection reduces overload. Overload weakens clarity. Clarity supports strength. Most people treat attention as unlimited. It is not. Every distraction costs energy. Energy spent reacting cannot be recovered. Energy preserved compounds. Compounding attention builds depth. Depth produces results. Results reinforce discipline. It's not about curiosity. It's about discipline. Curiosity without boundaries becomes distraction. Discipline filters curiosity. You pause before consuming. You ask one question. Does this strengthen me or weaken me? If it weakens, you decline. No drama. No justification. Just refusal. Refusal is strength. Most people fear missing out. They believe constant awareness equals advantage. It often equals noise. Noise fragments attention. Fragmented attention weakens performance. Weak performance increases stress. Stress triggers reaction. Reaction drains attention further. The cycle repeats. You interrupt it. You reduce input. You define focus blocks. During those blocks, attention is guarded. No checking. No switching. No browsing. You don't need their permission to be unavailable. You do not owe immediate access. Availability without boundaries invites weakness. Boundaries create structure. Structure supports discipline. Guarding attention also means monitoring. Internal input. Thoughts compete for focus. Worry. Rumination. Comparison. These drain energy silently. You observe them. You do not engage automatically. Engagement strengthens them. Observation weakens them. That's the key. What you do not feed loses power. Stillness helps here. In silence, you see what occupies attention by default. You notice patterns. You notice what pulls you repeatedly. You decide whether it deserves space. Decision restores authority. Authority reduces anxiety. Anxiety often arises from mental clutter. Clutter decreases when attention is selective. Selective attention simplifies life. Simplicity reduces stress. Reduced stress strengthens discipline. You have a choice. You can allow mental clutter to accumulate. Or you can clear it deliberately. Clearing requires standards. You define what matters. You return to it consistently. Returning trains focus. Focus strengthens control. Control protects discipline. Most people try to manage time. They should manage attention. Time is neutral. Attention is decisive. If attention is weak, time is wasted. If attention is strong, time is productive. Productivity is a result. Strength is the goal. Guarding attention also improves emotional stability. Constant exposure to stimulation heightens reactivity. Less input lowers baseline stress. Lower stress improves regulation. Improved regulation reduces impulsive decisions. Impulsive decisions weaken discipline. Everything connects. You do not need extreme isolation. You need intentional filtering. Reduce noise. Limit unnecessary conversations. Curate information. These are small decisions. Repeated daily. Small decisions compound. Compounding discipline builds strength. You don't need their permission to simplify your environment. You are allowed to remove what weakens you. Most people hesitate because they fear judgment. They fear appearing detached. Detached from noise is not detached from reality. It is selective engagement. Selective engagement is intelligent. Intelligence applies resources where they matter. Strength requires that precision. Guarding attention also changes identity. You begin to see yourself as someone who directs focus, not someone who is pulled. This identity shift matters. Identity guides behavior automatically. When you identify as disciplined, discipline requires less effort. Effort decreases. Consistency increases. Consistency defeats distraction. You stop feeling constantly rushed. Because fewer things compete for your mind. You feel steadier. Because attention is not scattered. Steadiness reinforces strength. That's the key. Protected attention creates internal stability. Internal stability supports every other discipline. Without it, reaction increases. With it, control holds. You learned how to finish what you start. Now you understand that finishing requires protected attention. Next, you must operate from defined standards. Because guarding attention is not enough if your behavior shifts with emotion. Acting from standards changes everything. Most people act from mood. If they feel strong, they act strong. If they feel tired, they act weak. If they feel pressured, they react fast. This creates instability. That's the key. Mood-based behavior cannot produce strength. Standards-based behavior can. A standard is a rule you do not renegotiate. It defines how you act before emotion enters. Without standards, every decision becomes emotional. Emotion fluctuates. Standards do not. You have a choice. You can let your mood decide your behavior. Or you can decide once and enforce it daily. Enforcement is discipline. Most people rely on intention. They say they want to be focused. They say they want to be consistent. They say they want to be calm. But they have no defined standard. Without a defined standard, intention collapses under pressure. Pressure reveals structure. If there is no structure, reaction wins. You don't need their permission to set internal rules. You do not need approval to hold yourself accountable. You are allowed to define how you operate. Standards must be clear. Vague standards fail. I will try harder is not a standard. I respond after I regulate is a standard. I finish before switching is a standard. I train daily regardless of mood is a standard. Clarity removes negotiation. Negotiation drains energy. Energy drained weakens discipline. That's the key. Defined behavior reduces emotional interference. When something challenges you, the standard answers. Not your mood. Not your impulse. The rule answers. This simplifies life. Less internal debate. Less hesitation. Less friction. Most stress is internal argument. Should I do this now? Should I wait? Should I respond? Standards eliminate this. You already know. You act accordingly. Acting from standards also strengthens identity. Identity forms from repeated behavior. If you repeatedly act according to a rule, you become that rule. You stop seeing discipline as effort. It becomes normal. Normal behavior requires less energy. Energy saved supports focus. Focus supports strength. Acting from standards also protects you from external pressure. When others push, your response is defined. You do not adjust based on approval. Approval seeking weakens discipline. Discipline seeks alignment, not validation. You don't need their permission to act from your principles. You are allowed to disappoint expectations if your standards require it. This is not arrogance. It is consistency. Consistency builds trust. Trust builds authority. Authority reduces emotional volatility. When you trust yourself, you react less. Reaction disrupts strength. Standards prevent reaction. It's not about personality. It's about discipline. Personality fluctuates. Discipline holds. Most people think discipline requires constant effort. It requires initial effort. Then it requires repetition. Repetition builds automation. Automation reduces strain. Over time, standards feel natural. But they must be enforced first. Enforcement requires calm firmness. Not aggression. Not self-criticism. Calm correction. When you break a standard, you do not spiral. You notice. You correct. You return. That's the key. Correction without drama strengthens discipline. Drama weakens it. Drama is emotional noise. Noise drains attention. Attention is the foundation of strength. Standards also clarify priorities. When you know your rules, you know what matters. You stop chasing everything. You focus on what aligns. Alignment reduces chaos. Chaos fragments attention. Fragmented attention weakens performance. Performance under discipline builds confidence. Confidence reinforces standards. The loop strengthens. You have a choice. You can operate from shifting emotion. Or you can operate from fixed principles. One is unstable. The other is reliable. Reliability builds strength over time. Strength over time creates stability. Stability allows long-term growth. Most people chase short-term intensity. They lack long-term consistency. Intensity feels powerful. Consistency is powerful. Consistency is built on standards. Standards also protect you when you are tired. Fatigue lowers emotional resistance. If you rely on mood, you collapse. If you rely on standards, you continue. Not perfectly, but sufficiently. Sufficient discipline compounds. Compounding builds results. Results reinforce belief. Belief strengthens identity. Identity sustains discipline. Everything connects. Acting from standards removes unpredictability. Unpredictability creates anxiety. When you know how you will respond, anxiety decreases. Calm replaces tension. Calm supports control. Control defines strength. That's the key. Strength is predictable behavior under pressure. Without standards, pressure changes you. With standards, pressure reveals you. Reveals discipline. Reveals stability. Reveals strength. You learned how to guard your attention. Now you understand that attention must be directed by principle. Otherwise it drifts. Next, you must strengthen your relationship with discomfort. Because standards are tested most when discomfort rises. Discomfort is not the enemy. Avoidance is. Most people structure their lives around comfort. They move toward ease. They move away from strain. They retreat from tension. This feels natural. It weakens discipline. That's the key. Strength grows in discomfort handled calmly. Discomfort appears in many forms. Physical fatigue. Mental resistance. Emotional unease. The reaction is almost always the same. Escape. Escape through distraction. Through delay. Through justification. Each escape trains fragility. Fragility collapses under pressure. You have a choice. You can continue escaping discomfort. Or you can remain steady inside it. Remaining steady builds capacity. Capacity determines strength. Most people believe discomfort is a sign to stop. It is often a sign to stay. Not recklessly. Deliberately. Stillness matters here. When discomfort rises, you pause. You regulate your breathing. You relax unnecessary tension. You observe the sensation without labeling it as danger. This interrupts escalation. Escalation is emotional. Observation is disciplined. It's not about pain tolerance. It's about discipline. Discipline decides not to react impulsively. When you react emotionally to discomfort, it amplifies. When you observe calmly, it stabilizes. That's the key. Calm attention reduces intensity. Discomfort peaks and falls. Most people act at the peak. They quit when resistance feels strongest. If they waited, the intensity would drop. But they do not wait. They react. Reaction reinforces avoidance. Avoidance increases future discomfort. The cycle strengthens. You break it. You stay. You breathe. You hold your position. Not forever. Long enough to prove you can. This builds resilience. Resilience is controlled endurance. Endurance is strength over time. Strength over time defines discipline. You don't need their permission to sit with discomfort. You do not need approval to resist immediate relief. Relief is temporary. Growth is cumulative. Most people chase relief. Relief feels productive. It is often regression. You must learn the difference between necessary recovery and avoidance. Recovery is strategic. Avoidance is emotional. Recovery restores strength. Avoidance preserves weakness. The distinction is internal. You feel resistance. You ask one question. Is this harmful or merely uncomfortable? Most situations are uncomfortable. Very few are harmful. You act accordingly. If it is uncomfortable, you stay. If it is harmful, you adjust. Calm evaluation prevents exaggeration. Exaggeration fuels escape. Escape erodes discipline. Enduring discomfort calmly also improves focus. When you remain steady under strain, attention sharpens. You stop looking for exits. You look for solutions. Solution-focused thinking builds confidence. Confidence reduces fear. Fear often disguises itself as discomfort. When fear weakens, strength increases. Most people misinterpret discomfort as a threat to identity. They think struggle means incompetence. It does not. Struggle means effort. Effort builds capability. Capability increases capacity. Capacity supports discipline. Everything connects. You have a choice. You can retreat when it feels hard. Or you can remain long enough to grow. Remaining builds self-respect. Self-respect reduces insecurity. Insecurity fuels emotional reaction. Reaction weakens discipline. Stillness helps you endure. You slow your internal pace. You refuse to dramatize the moment. You stay with the task. You stay in the conversation. You stay in the silence. Silence under discomfort is powerful. It prevents escalation. Escalation drains energy. Energy conserved supports performance. Enduring discomfort calmly also stabilizes identity. You begin to see yourself as capable under strain. Not fragile. Not dependent on ease. Capable. This changes how you approach challenges. You stop fearing difficulty. You anticipate it. Preparation replaces anxiety. Anxiety decreases when you trust your endurance. Trust in your endurance builds strength. That's the key. Confidence grows when you prove you can stay. Proof comes from repetition. Small discomfort faced. Daily. Waking when you prefer sleep. Working when you prefer delay. Holding silence when you prefer reaction. These are ordinary moments. They build extraordinary stability. You do not need dramatic challenges. You need consistent exposure to manageable strain. Manageable strain builds resilience gradually. Gradual resilience lasts. Intensity without consistency burns out. Calm endurance compounds. You don't need their permission to choose growth over relief. You are allowed to remain steady while others retreat. This is not about superiority. It is about discipline. Discipline sustains when emotion fluctuates. Emotion will fluctuate. Discomfort will appear. Pressure will rise. Your response defines strength. Stay calm. Stay present. Stay deliberate. Over time, discomfort loses its authority. It becomes familiar, predictable, manageable. You no longer fear it. You use it. Use it as training. Use it as evidence of growth. This mindset protects discipline. Without it, pressure breaks you. With it, pressure strengthens you. You learned how to act from standards. Now you understand that standards are tested under discomfort. Passing that test builds resilience. Next, you must remove reliance on effort entirely. Because endurance is powerful. But automation is stronger. Effort is unreliable. It fades with fatigue. It weakens under stress. It disappears when emotion rises. If your discipline depends only on effort, it will collapse. That's the key. Strength must not rely on mood or energy. It must rely on structure. Most people try to stay disciplined through force. They push harder. They tense up. They promise themselves to do better. Force drains quickly. Structure sustains. You have a choice. You can continue fighting yourself daily. Or you can build systems that reduce the fight. Systems remove negotiation. Negotiation drains attention. Attention drained weakens control. Most failure happens in small moments of decision. Should I start now? Should I check this? Should I stop? Every micro decision consumes energy. When energy drops, discipline drops. You remove unnecessary decisions. You define defaults. Defaults execute automatically. No debate. No delay. For example, work begins at a fixed time. Training happens at a fixed time. Devices are placed away during focus blocks. You do not decide each day. You follow the standard. It's not about willpower. It's about discipline. Discipline creates predictable behavior. Predictable behavior reduces stress. Stress reduction protects attention. That's the key. Automation preserves strength when effort fades. Most people rely on motivation spikes. They operate intensely for short periods. Then they crash. This creates inconsistency. Inconsistency erodes confidence. Confidence weakened increases doubt. Doubt feeds hesitation. Hesitation disrupts discipline. Automation removes hesitation. You know what happens next. No internal debate. You don't need their permission to simplify your routine. You do not need approval to reduce flexibility. Flexibility without structure becomes chaos. Chaos fragments attention. Structure stabilizes it. To make control automatic, you start with environment. Environment shapes behavior. If distractions are within reach, you will use them. If they are removed, behavior shifts. Remove the trigger. Place the phone outside the room. Close unnecessary applications. Prepare your workspace before you begin. Preparation reduces friction. Reduced friction increases consistency. Consistency builds identity. Identity strengthens discipline. You also automate recovery. Sleep at a fixed time. Eat at defined intervals. Move daily without debate. When recovery is predictable, energy stabilizes. Stable energy supports control. Unstable energy amplifies emotion. Emotion disrupts discipline. Everything connects. Automation also applies internally. When a negative thought appears, you do not analyze endlessly. You label it. You redirect. Same response each time. Repetition installs the pattern. Pattern reduces mental load. Mental load drains attention. Attention drained weakens strength. You have a choice. You can continue reacting to every impulse. Or you can predefine your response. Predefined response removes uncertainty. Uncertainty creates anxiety. Anxiety fuels reaction. Reaction erodes discipline. Automation interrupts this cycle. Most people resist structure because they fear rigidity. They want freedom. Freedom without structure becomes drift. Drift weakens results. Structure creates real freedom. When behavior is stable, you trust yourself. Trust reduces fear. Fear decreases emotional volatility. Emotional volatility weakens discipline. That's the key. Structure produces calm authority. Making control automatic also requires repetition. You repeat the standard daily. Even when you do not feel like it. Especially then. Repetition builds neural efficiency. Efficiency reduces effort. Reduced effort increases sustainability. Sustainability is strength over time. Time magnifies discipline. Small automated actions compound. Daily focus. Daily restraint. Daily execution. Compounded over months, they transform identity. Identity shifts from trying to operating. Operating is calm. Trying is emotional. You don't need their permission to operate differently. You are allowed to live by design. Design replaces impulse. Impulse is unstable. Design is stable. Automation also protects you during stress. When pressure rises, you default to habits. If habits are weak, you collapse. If habits are strong, you hold. You prepare for pressure before it arrives. You build systems when calm. So they function when stressed. This is strategic discipline. Not reactive discipline. Reactive discipline appears after mistakes. Strategic discipline prevents them. Prevention saves energy. Energy preserved strengthens focus. Focus strengthens control. Control defines strength. Most people want to feel strong. Strength is not a feeling. It is predictable behavior under stress. Predictable behavior comes from automation. You remove optionality where it weakens you. Optional discipline fails. Mandatory discipline holds. Mandatory does not mean extreme. It means non-negotiable. You act regardless of mood. You regulate regardless of stress. You finish regardless of boredom. Over time, effort decreases. Because the system runs. This is the goal. Control without constant struggle. Strength without emotional spikes. Calm execution. You learned how to endure discomfort. Now you understand that endurance must be supported by structure. Without structure, endurance breaks. With structure, discipline stabilizes. Next, you must integrate everything. Not as isolated techniques. As a way of living. Unshakable control is not intensity. It is stability. It is the ability to act the same way on good days and bad days. That's the key. Strength is consistency under pressure. Most people are disciplined when conditions are ideal. They are calm when nothing challenges them. They are focused when nothing competes. That is not strength. Strength is visible when pressure rises. When emotion pulls. When fatigue sets in. When distraction tempts. Unshakable control means your standards do not move. You have a choice. You can adjust your behavior based on circumstance. Or you can let circumstance reveal your discipline. Circumstances will change. Your standards should not. Living with unshakable control means you stop chasing emotional highs. You stop needing excitement to perform. You stop needing urgency to act. Urgency often hides instability. Stability is quieter. It does not rush. It does not dramatize. It executes. You don't need their permission to move calmly. You do not need validation to act deliberately. You are allowed to operate at your pace. Pace controlled is power preserved. Most mistakes come from speed without awareness. You pause. You regulate. You decide. This sequence does not change because someone pressures you. It does not change because you feel stressed. It does not change because you are tired. You maintain it. That's the key. Consistency of sequence builds authority. Authority over yourself builds confidence. Confidence reduces anxiety. Anxiety fuels reaction. Reaction erodes strength. Unshakable control also means you accept responsibility fully. No excuses. No blaming conditions. No blaming people. If you break a standard, you correct it. Calmly. Without drama. Correction strengthens discipline. Self-criticism weakens it. You do not spiral. You adjust. Adjustment keeps you aligned. Alignment preserves identity. Identity guides automatic behavior. When you identify as disciplined, control becomes natural. You no longer feel like you are forcing yourself. You operate. Operating is different from trying. Trying is emotional. Operating is structured. Structure reduces internal conflict. Conflict drains energy. Energy preserved supports focus. Focus supports strength. Everything connects. Living with unshakable control also simplifies life. You know what you do daily. You know what you do not do. You do not waste time debating. Debate weakens clarity. Clarity sharpens decisions. Sharp decisions reduce regret. Regret erodes confidence. Confidence strengthens discipline. You have a choice. You can remain reactive to changing conditions. Or you can become steady regardless of them. Steadiness influences others. When you remain composed, others adjust. When you remain focused, noise fades. When you remain calm, pressure decreases. This is influence without aggression. Influence rooted in stability lasts. Most people look for strength in external achievement. Achievement without internal control is unstable. True strength is internal alignment. Action aligned with standards. Response aligned with regulation. Focus aligned with purpose. When alignment exists, life feels simpler. Not easier. Simpler. You stop scattering energy. You stop reacting impulsively. You stop abandoning effort midway. You operate from principle. Principle does not fluctuate. Emotion does. That's the key. Unshakable control means emotion does not dictate behavior. Emotion is acknowledged, not obeyed. Stillness remains your foundation. When pressure rises, you slow internally. You breathe. You regulate. You think. You act deliberately. This becomes automatic. Not because you are extraordinary. Because you practiced consistently. Practice installs identity. Identity sustains discipline. Discipline builds strength. Strength protects control. Control creates freedom. Freedom from impulsive decisions. Freedom from emotional volatility. Freedom from constant distraction. This is not dramatic. It is quiet authority. Authority over attention. Authority over reaction. Authority over timing. Living with unshakable control means you no longer chase intensity. You value consistency. You value reliability. You value clarity. Clarity over chaos. Calm over urgency. Discipline over mood. You do not need perfection. You need persistence. When you drift, you return. When you fail, you correct. When you feel weak, you follow the standard anyway. This repetition cements identity. Identity becomes strength. Strength becomes your baseline. Not your peak. Your baseline. That is unshakable control. You learn to stop waiting for motivation. You learn to control reaction. You chose hard over easy. You built strength in stillness. You finished what you started. You guarded attention. You acted from standards. You endured discomfort calmly. You made control automatic. Now you live it. Every day. Quietly. No announcements. No performance. Just discipline. Discipline is strength. And strength is sustained control. Live from that standard. Discipline is not dramatic. It is deliberate. It is the decision to act correctly when emotion resists. To pause when urgency pushes. To stay when comfort calls you away. Strength is built in quiet moments. In small refusals. In consistent standards. You do not need more motivation. You need more discipline. From this point forward, enforce your rules. Pause before reacting. Finish what you start. Guard your attention. Discipline is strength. Live like it.